And welcome back everyone to today's recap. It was round number 3 and I played against Spanish Grandmaster Maksim Chigaev, originally representing Russia, but now he has been playing for Spain for the last couple of years. Very strong Grandmaster, currently rated about 2630. Peak rating I think is around 2650 or 2660. So I had the white pieces today, which was a little bit surprising since I had white yesterday as well. But it was just like that many of the stronger opponents, which I have to play up this round, against someone stronger, did not manage to win their black games yesterday, so some of the people had to have double white. Also my friend and compatriot Dominic Horvath from Austria also has double white today. So today I went for d4, not for e4, again kind of mixing things up, trying to make preparation for my opponents harder, and he went for knight f6, c4, g6, which of course I prepared for mostly because Chigaev is a huge expert on the King's Indian and it's his main opening by far, and in general he's a very strong attacking player, very strong with the initiative, so this opening in general suits him quite well. And I went for g3 here, kind of a more practical approach than the main line, at least for this game, because in the main line, apart from him also playing Grunfeld a couple of times, which would mean that I even have to prepare another huge opening. In this main line, he plays all sorts of moves like b6, even knight c6, knight d7, knight a6, h6, queen e8, a5, e takes d4. So it would have been very hard to prepare here. And same goes for other lines like bishop e2. Black in general has many options, and experience is way more important here than some engine analysis in most cases. So I thought g3 is a more practical approach and a safer approach against him. He went bishop g7, bishop g2, short castle, knight c3, and now the move knight c6, which I think is quite interesting. Black has a specific idea, which we will see after the move I played in the game, which is knight f3, and now to transpose to some sort of Grunfeld with d5. The funny thing is that I was even aware of the move knight c6, and even in the morning my coach told me that this is something he could play, but then for some reason I kind of forgot about it and just checked other things. And I knew that e3 is probably the most critical move here, but I also knew that after e5, d5, knight a5 is kind of the move, and here things get very complicated, and it's kind of a very typical King's Indian position, which is also very playable for black. Also d6 first and then to go e5. In general, black is doing quite well here as well. But if white wants to get like a big fighting game, then probably e3 is the way to go here. In fact, Chigaev had the game himself here after e5, d5. He didn't go knight a5. It was 2019 against Vidit. He went knight b8, which is a big mistake because after d6 now white is much better. But knight a5, he also knew that, told me after the game, is kind of the way to go for black here. But as you can see, I spent some time here and went knight f3 because I wasn't quite familiar with all the details after e3. So I just thought I would stay solid, knight f3. After d6, we will transpose to one of the lines which anyway one has to prepare if you go for g3. But now he goes for d5, and now we have some sort of Grunfeld again with the knight already being on c6. Kind of unusual, but as we will see, black will have immediate chances to strike in the center with e5. So I took on d5, kind of the only option, otherwise white would take on c4 himself, black would take on c4 himself. So c takes d5, knight takes d5, and now short castle. And this is all still somewhat theory. Here he went e5. Again, I was still somewhat familiar with this, but didn't really know any concrete theory. Knight takes d5, the move, and now e4. So this is what I still knew. Kind of a very beautiful trick here, not capturing the piece immediately because of the queen d5, knight d5, queen takes d4, queen is attacked, knight c6, black is in some trouble, I think. But e4 is the way, and now black is threatening to take here. Also the queen d5 now is a threat, of course. So I played knight e5, which looked logical here. I was still somewhat familiar with it, but my knowledge more or less ended here. So now he has to take on d5. If knight takes e5, d takes e5, he cannot recapture anymore on d5, so I'm just a piece up. So queen takes d5, and now knight takes e6. And here I thought that b takes c6 would also be an option, but he went for queen c6, which somehow looks a bit more positionally sound. I thought bc is also fine. I would have probably gone for something like bishop f4 or bishop e3, when also here probably black is active enough to make a draw. But queen c6, very logical, and here after bishop f4, bishop g4, he offered a draw, which I accepted, simply because he was already quite up on time, and I thought the position is anyway quite dry, and I wasn't quite feeling like today is the right time to fight, basically. I will tell you some of the variations I calculated here. Bishop g4, the idea is simply that now the e2 pawn is often hanging. So for example, if rook c1, queen b5 could be an idea. It's actually not easy to protect this pawn, this pawn, this pawn on d4 is also a bit weak. So I originally intended to go h3, and now his idea was to go back bishop e6. And the point of provoking h3 is that often if I get to take on e4, then the pawn on h3 will be hanging. By the way, bishop g4 is not the only move here. I think also rook d8 was possible. Also some queen moves like queen b6 I think would be possible as well. Yeah, I was also calculating d5 at this moment, just to go back here. But I thought that after queen c4, this is what I calculated, bishop f4, now bishop takes b2, otherwise rook b1, rook c1 is coming. Rook b1, and now all of the bishop moves didn't seem that clear to me. Like even if he goes back, I will get the pawn on c7, but at the same time he will get this a2 pawn and things will get very complicated. So I just went bishop f4, which seemed very natural, and as we know, after bishop g4 it ended in a draw. But I was calculating h3, bishop e6, rook c1, and now I thought that queen d5 is a strong move. Queen b6 might also look logical to attack those two pawns, but here I thought now I have d5, which looked very unpleasant for black, because usually he wants to react with rook d8, but that doesn't work here because of bishop c7 when queen and rook are both attacked. So I thought that queen d5 is probably the best move, attacking this pawn and that pawn as well. And now I was mostly thinking about rook c7, bishop c7 might also be possible. And here something like rook c8, for example, I thought is one option for black. And in general, it seemed like black will have very good compensation overall. And I wasn't quite sure of this. At some moments he can take on d4, perhaps even right away. That also might be possible. So black has many options, and in general I was quite worried that the bishop on g2 will be shut out at some moment with f5, when things could also become quite bad for me. Also these two pawns are often hanging, so yeah, I wasn't quite sure here, so I settled for a draw. In general, the tournament is still quite long, and from my experience, the most important rounds will come in the end, and there it's the most important to keep the energy, and that's also one of the reasons why I made this decision to go for an earlier draw today. And yeah, just trying to get some rest. Maybe I'll finally have time to hit the gym tonight or the spa, or go for some walks. And yeah, in general, that's the plan. So that was my reasoning behind it. So now that we concluded my game analysis, it wasn't that long, so I want you guys to have a bit of a longer recap. So that's why I looked at, I think it was 2 or 3 games, which I thought were interesting in the tournament overall. And I want to give you my thoughts on the games there. So I hope you guys will also like that, not just to see my games, but I did see some interesting openings, which I wanted to have a look at. The first one, I think was, yeah, this game, Petkov against Dardha, which I just wanted to kind of show you this opening, which in the meanwhile is quite well known in general. But if you're an e4 player, especially if you're an Italian player, it definitely makes sense to add this line with knight c3 to your repertoire. So this is kind of the position you will always reach in this line. And usually, at least for me personally, this knight c3 move was kind of what I played when I started out with chess, often with the idea of bishop g5. And then, for example, this is something I kind of had many times when I was just starting with chess, to get something like this, and then often some huge attack with knight d5. But once you start studying the openings more carefully, you realize that these ideas with bishop g5 are actually not that dangerous, because these sacrifices often don't work. Like here, for example, now bishop e7 would probably just neutralize white's attack. But the idea in general is not even to go for this bishop g5 in most cases, but often to go for bishop e3. So this is kind of what people have been developing over the last couple of years. And this system in general is not that easy for black to handle. d6 might also look logical. And now knight a4 is the whole idea, when white will gain the bishop pair and can hope for some small advantage. For example, bishop b6, I think this is one of the lines how it goes. Usually white even doesn't take right away, but a3. And very often a position like this is what you can reach with the white pieces, and you will try to do something like this. Often black will even get back the bishop pair, but then white will try to... Oh, I think I missed that knight b4 works here. But anyway, some position like this is what you will mostly get, and then white will go for something like c4, b5, and try to play on the queen side as well. So that's the idea of this. But in the game, Dardha played h6, which now has the idea that knight a4 doesn't work as well because black just can retreat the bishop to e7. But if black makes those moves, h6 or also a6 right away, then white will mostly switch to this plan with bishop e3 because he will argue that both of these moves are not as useful. So in the game it was h6, a3, a6, and now Petkov went for the move bishop e3. And now black could take on e3, which didn't happen in the game, but then white will have this open f-file, often connected with some initiative there. So Dardha played d6, and now we have this typical structure with bishop c5, dc5, knight d5 now. And in general, white has probably a little bit of an easier play here because black's pawn structure is a bit broken. And yeah, the game continued like this. In general, black is also not that much worse, but it seems a bit more pleasant for white now. He captured with the f-pawn, which does damage his pawn structure, but also kicks back the knight to g3. So this is the current position here. Looks very much playable for black as well. Actually, I prefer for black that he has this pawn on e6 now, because then the knight on f5 will be kicked out. So I don't know. I guess bishop e6 is a good move as well. Now this is the current position. It's just a game, so many things can happen. But I just wanted to show you this opening because I think it's quite a useful thing to add for you, if you anyway play the Italian. Next game I thought was quite interesting from an opening perspective was David Anton against Dudin Gleb. By the way, the game before was Petkov against Dardha, if I didn't mention that. So now we're going to have a quick look at David Anton, Spanish Grandmaster, against Dudin Gleb, representing Hungary. And it was c4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, and now e4, which has also gained quite some traction in the last couple of years. Back in the day, it was considered to be more of an incorrect gambit, but now some new ideas for black have emerged. So the idea in general is knight g5, the most testing move. It looks like white is just gaining back the pawn on e4, and now c6 is the new move, basically, which was, I think, popularized by Adiban a couple of years ago. And the idea is if white takes here, black will push d5 and he will gain a lot of time. I think the main line goes cd, cd, knight g3, and now h5 is how black handles the position. And I think this is how the main line goes: e3, h4, knight e2, knight c6, and in general you will reach some position like this. This is what you will get, and black mostly gets some long castle and has some long-lasting initiative because the pawn on h4 helps with the attack on the king set, and white will have a hard time developing. So this is kind of the general idea here for black. By the way, some historical fact, I think that b5 was the line which back in the day was played for black, but this is not entirely correct. I think d3 is the way to kind of crush the gambit, if I'm not entirely wrong here. So that's why they came up with c6, and David Anton went queen a4, which is a good practical line for white, because again, this knight takes e4 can get very sharp, and queen a4 at least keeps some control, even though the lines also tend to get quite sharp. Dudin went queen e7, which I think is the main move. Now queen c2 back. So idea of queen a4 is just to stop d5, because if d5 now cd doesn't work as well, because well, there is the pin. So queen e7, queen c2, b5. I think this is still somewhat theory, and here David Anton went for knight takes e4, which I think is not the move. I think c takes d5 is how the main line goes, and then d5, something like that, is what I checked back in the day. But he went for knight e4, and now we have some very strange endgame, b3, d5, now knight g3, and Dudin played knight a6, bishop e2, looks around equalish. I thought that it's more logical to take right away and then to go knight e6, but I guess Dudin can do the same now anyway, also to take now, and then maybe knight c5 or knight b4. Looks like black cannot be in any trouble overall, because white is still quite underdeveloped. So this was another game, and two more things I wanted to mention. The first one was Isik Can from Turkey against Gledura Benjamin. And why I wanted to mention this game was because Can Isik with the white pieces played my recommendation in my Reti course for white, which is Rook e1. So that was quite interesting, I thought. And just to show you how the game went. So this is again what I recommend in my chess-based course, Rook e1. And this is how the game went. So the idea of Rook e1 is just to prepare e4, of course. And this is how it went. I think I still have this position in my course. Bishop e3 was played, b6, and now Isik went for g4. I'm not entirely sure what my my recommendation is here. Maybe it's also g4. Could also be that this position is not analyzed anymore in my course. There are also some ideas with d5 quite often, transposing to some sort of Sicilian structures. That's also one idea. But g4 also with the idea of g5 sometimes can also be an idea. So this is how the game went, and yeah, looks very unclear to me now, chances for both sides. But anyway, I wanted to mention that this line with Rook e1 is also being played on in the European Chess Championship. Last game I wanted to have a look at is the game Horvath Dominic against Daniel Yuffa, and of course Horvath Dominic, good friend of mine who's also from Austria, and I thought just the opening was quite interesting because there's one nice trick I wanted to show you. So this is the Bogo Indian with a5. Dominic playing the white pieces. a5 one of the moves, queen e7 being another one. Also bishop takes e2 is possible, c5 as well. But a5, this line is quite interesting. I've played this myself with the black pieces quite often. The idea is just to protect the bishop and then at some point force white to go a3 basically, when in general this inclusion of a5, a3 will probably be more useful for black, since in a position like this, white often wants to go b4, and now with the pawn on a5 that usually doesn't work because there will be 8 takes b4. That's one of the reasons why this could be useful for black, this inclusion. So Dominic went knight f3 and now d6, bishop g2, knight bd7, and now Dominic decided to take on b4, which surprised me quite a lot. The main line goes short castle, and here is kind of the trick I wanted to show you. So black has, of course, a couple of moves here, but has to be careful about one trick. Short castle might look very logical, but here there's one idea which I think is very useful for you to remember. This is bishop c1, and already black is in a lot of trouble here. I ran into this myself with the black pieces once, so I wanted to mention this to you that hopefully it won't happen to you as well. Now the bishop on b4 is basically trapped. If d5, there will come c5, again a3 is there, and I think the only way for black not to lose the piece is to go a5, and then white will simply win a pawn like this. So that's quite useful to know. I think the main line after short castle here then goes e5, with the idea that after bishop c1, black has e takes d4. But in general, after e5, I still think that white is doing quite well. I think knight c3 is one of the moves. Also bishop c1 might be possible here as well. But yeah, anyway, this trick is nice to know. Dominic took here, went queen b3, and after a couple of moves, this is the position we have right now. Looks quite drawish, but black... probably I would pick black if any color, because this bishop is light squared and this pawn is already on a light square as well, so this pawn could become a target later on. But anyway, guys, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this kind of multiple recaps for today, since my game was not that long and there were not too many details to go into. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel and comment the video. It really helps the algorithm. So yeah, hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow.